Not sure how to raise invoices for deposits and how to allocate them to your invoices in Xero? This video is for you. Hi, if you're new here, welcome. My name's Lucy and I run Burtons Academy, where I help provide accounting top tips and software training for accountants and business owners. So don't forget to click that like and subscribe for similar content. During this session, what we're going to do is we are going to look at various ways to raise invoices when we have deposits from clients. So this might be something that's quite frequent in your business. Alternatively, it's just something that you're doing on this one-off occasion. Either or is absolutely fine. So what I can start with is my sales invoice. So clicking on sales and going to invoice. I've already got my invoice set up. So I know, for example, I'm going to work with the DT group and it is going to cost them £525. So that is what this invoice is for. What I have done is I've just set it up in relation to the items that I'm going to be working with them for. I haven't put dates and I haven't said what element is going to be a deposit. That is absolutely fine. So I would then send this invoice to the DT group and they will then decide to pay me whether we've agreed the 50% or maybe 25% upfront as a deposit. So what I could do is leave this invoice as it is and just wait until I get my payment through. So we're just going to go back to our bank account, so accounting and bank accounts, and see whether we've had a payment received. So going on the reconciliation screen, I can see, and what we're going to do is we'll just pretend that we've only got the one received item through so far. I can see that I have this 2nd of April payment received. If I start creating a transaction here, that will duplicate what the invoice is already doing. So I don't want to click the create button. Instead, I would want to click the match option. However, as you can see, this invoice doesn't match the same figure that is in here. So instead, what we can do is we can click the split button. And so what that is saying is I have received an element of this invoice and I'm going to split the payment. So this invoice is for £525, but there's been a part payment and that is £262.50. So by clicking split, we can then reconcile. So click OK, then click confirm. Bank account reconciles. And then if we jump back to the sales invoice, we can now see that that has been part paid. This is the option I really like because I like to make sure that everything reconciles in my bank account rather than going from the invoice screen. So this is my option 1 and recommendation. Alternatively, what you could do is you could create the payment at the bottom of the screen and type it in here. That will then, what I will then do, I'll show you how to do that now. So if I said, I can't remember exactly when it was paid, but let's just say it was the 19th of April. I would then choose the bank account as the account that it's been paid to because that's where it's been paid into. I don't want to choose a different location because the account has been chosen at the top of the invoice. The amount paid is the remaining balance, and then click record payment. What that does is, as that's the remaining balance, that now invoice is showing as fully paid. And back onto our bank account screen, what we can do is then we can allocate this transaction we've just created to the bank account. So as you can see, we have this green section now, and it is saying I've allocated a payment to this invoice. Is the payment in the bank account the same transaction? And it is, so we can click OK. So those are the two options you could do from an invoicing perspective that you've already created. This allows you to invoice the client in full in one invoice, and then it provides you with clean records and the one invoice per client. Again, it's something that I would recommend doing. Whether you do the first option or the second option for your reconciliation, it's completely up to you. You can do a mixture like we've just done. Alternatively, just stick to the one option is absolutely fine. Option 2, you might choose for the client to pay you and then raise the invoice later. Again, that's absolutely fine as long as you remember to raise the invoices. Alternatively, you might not even use the invoices section in Xero. So that, again, is absolutely fine. So what you'll do is come onto the bank account screen and you will go onto your Reconcile screen and you will see the invoice. You will see the transfers in you have received. So if you're going to just create these without having an invoice, you then need to choose the create option, and then the who is going to be again DT group. And then the what is sales. And then you just click OK. In this instance, you won't be able to use the match button because there isn't an invoice created. So what you could do in this instance is now go away and create that invoice. I don't really recommend this option because typically you might forget what the transfer is relating to, and then your invoice becomes very generic. So typically we like to work with creating a quote or an invoice at the beginning, and then that's what the clients are sending you in. If you don't need to worry about things like that and it is just the same service all the time, then of course just continue as you are using the sales option. Option 3, what you might want to do is raise one invoice for the deposit and then a second invoice for the final invoice and deduct the deposit off of that. So going to the sales invoices, we click on sales and invoices. And here, so jumping into the first invoice, this one is for our deposit. And so all I've done is I've called it deposit as a description, and then I've included the price because that is how much deposit I'm asking this client to send me. So then what I can do again is go back to my bank account and allocate the first payment. So back onto our Reconcile screen, back onto match, and then I can match this to the invoice. And I know that invoice number 3 is my deposit invoice. So I'll click OK on that first one. And then before I click on this second one, what I'm going to do is, again, we're just pretending that doesn't exist just yet. And what I'll do is I'll show you the second invoice I've now created. For ease, what I've done is I've created one invoice, which is the full bill, less the deposit. So what we can do, I'll change this to edit format. And what we can do is we can say, my invoice, what is this for, as a full thing showing all my products, because at the moment, the client only knows they've paid a deposit, but their invoice hasn't detailed exactly what services they've had from you. So this second invoice is a really important tool for us to do that information. You could have put that on the first one if you wanted, but sometimes you're not going to know what that deposit actually relates to until a little bit later on. So again, this is why having it in the second invoice is always a nice option. So I know that I'm going to have some meetings for £400, and I know I'm going to have payroll for £125. But that's the full invoice, not the invoice less the deposit. So what we needed to do was click this add row button, and that will then create this fourth line. And so where I've then created a deposit line, that's where I can then put less the deposit I've already received. Again, this all relates to sales. I'm not going to start having an account for all my deposits and an account for all of my sales services. If you do though, that's not a problem. You can have that level of detail. Just don't have too much detail if you don't want to keep on top of it, because once you start, it's going to be hard to change it in the future. So I would just say it all relates to sales, and I'll just provide the detail at a later point. So that's why I'm using sales as my account code. So now in here, I then need to put a minus because I'm going to not have the full cost of 400 plus 125 on top of what they've already paid. So I need to reduce this by £262.50, what they've already paid me. And then I can click save on this invoice. And that now tells me and the client, you now have to pay me the remaining balance of £262.50. If we didn't have this line item in here, the client would accidentally pay us too much, or we would say, that's fine, pay us the difference, and we'll just figure it out on the accounts, and it could become a bit messy. So I do think, again, having this third line in here, having that minus as an option is a really valuable tool. So then what we can do is go back to the bank account, go back to our Reconcile screen. And again, here we already have the invoice showing on a green section. So that means we can just allocate the payment automatically. And then that's done. These were just some of the options for raising invoices for deposits in Xero. If you'd like further options or any other accounting top tips or how to use Xero, don't forget to like and subscribe for similar content. See you at the next one.